Welcome, everyone. We are delighted to be in air conditioning. Welcome. My name is Josh Owen. I am the Vignelli Distinguished Professor of Design, Director of the Vignelli Center for Design Studies. Tonight marks the first event of the 23-24 academic year's Vignelli Design Conversations series, presented by Design Milk and RIT's Magic Center, and made possible in part by the generosity of RIT alumnus Chris Bailey and Bailey Brand Consulting. I'd like to begin by offering my thanks to RIT's Magic Center and their team of talented students and staff and faculty, as well as our interpreters for this evening, Lola Johnson and Stephanie Ferris, for their good work. RIT's Vignelli Center for Design Studies is an international hub for education, research, collaboration, and advocacy, which expands the scope of the programs in the College of Art and Design School of Design. The facility houses the archive of renowned designers Lella and Massimo Vignelli, whose works are icons of international design. The center and archives sit within RIT's College of Art and Design, which was built on the traditional territory of the Onondaga, or people of the Great Hill. In English, they're known as the Seneca people and keepers of the Western Door. They are one of the 6 sovereign nations that make up the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. We honor the land on which RIT was built and recognize the unique relationship that the indigenous stewards have with this land. That relationship is the core of their traditions, cultures, and histories. We recognize the history of genocide, colonization, and assimilation of indigenous people that took place on this land. Mindful of these histories, we work towards understanding, acknowledging, and reconciling. As stewards of history and content, we must acknowledge and seek to learn from our context, bad and good, ugly and beautiful. This applies to the Vignelli Center as with any archive. The Vignellis taught us that design is a systematic framework for solving the world's most intractable problems. If recent times have taught us anything, it's that while we are, as humans, are adaptable, our societies and systems have significant flaws. We're at a point where we need to have difficult discussions and work to create a new balance in the world. In this, design must play a critical role. As director, I aim to make the Vignelli Center even more accessible and applicable by bringing in stimulating guest contributors from diverse and often underrepresented backgrounds who help us to consider design in innovative ways. The Vignelli's Design is One philosophy leaves us with the universal message that design is a lens through which we can envision a more inclusive and sustainable tomorrow. This evening, we are delighted to welcome distinguished designer and RIT Industrial Design alumna Patricia Moore back home. Moore is an internationally renowned gerontologist and designer, serving as a leading authority on consumer lifespan behaviors and requirements. For a period of 3 years, 1979 to 1982, in an exceptional and rather daring experiment, Moore traveled throughout the United States and Canada, disguised as women more than 80 years of age. With her body altered to simulate the normal sensory changes associated with aging, she was able to respond to people, products, and environments as an elder. Her broad range of experience includes communication design, research, product development and design, environmental design, package design, transportation design, market analysis, and product positioning. Moore holds undergraduate degrees in industrial, environmental, and communication design from RIT, completion of advanced studies in biomechanics at New York University's Medical School and Rusk Institute graduate degrees in psychology and counseling and in human development or social gerontology from Columbia University. Syracuse University awarded Moore a doctorate in 2012, Hasselt University in 2019, Sheffield Hallam University in 2021, and the College for Creative Studies in 2022. Moore is a fellow of the Industrial Designers Society, has been named by ID Magazine as one of the 40 most socially conscious designers in the world, and was selected in the year 2000 by a consortium of news editors and organizations as one of the 100 most important women in America. Syracuse University selected Moore for a 2012 honorary doctorate for serving as a guiding force for a more humane and livable world, blazing a path for inclusiveness as a true leader in the movement of universal design. ABC World News featured Moore as one of 50 Americans defining the new millennium. In 2019, Moore was honored with the Cooper Hewitt's prestigious National Design Award in the Design Mind category. And I was lucky enough to be there to celebrate with her. And the Center for Health Design honored Moore with the 2020 Changemaker Award. In 2022, the National Association of Schools for Art and Design honored Moore with their Citation Award, and the World Design Organization selected Moore for the World Design Medal, which will be presented at the 2023 World Design Congress in Tokyo. Many, many awards, and many to come, of which we're so excited. Please join me in a warm Vignelli Center welcome for the indelible Patricia Moore. So folks, we have a little bit of a treat for you tonight to start off. Bear with me as I switch a few slides around. We have located a vintage video of some of the content that was described early on in my remarks about Patty's work for the book Disguised. So I'm going to start by showing you that. Okay, Patty.
Okay.
So that's a bit of a teaser that we're going to come back to in a few minutes. Tell us about what we're looking at.
Well, I guess the year was 2020. I was packed. I was ready to come for my annual visit. I had made origami 4-leaf clovers because it was March. And if you can't figure that out, we'll talk later. And I got a call, and Josh said, "We're shut down." And I began a whole new lifestyle called Zoom, which I hate. I'm a live act, I think. I'm not good on a little computer screen. I gave most of those shamrocks away, but I did manage to bring a couple for you. So it was a sad day. It was such an odd transition for us globally to be thrown into this new lifestyle.
Yeah, we had planned all kinds of events
Mhm.
for Patty to join us for a week, and I think it was to be early March, so it was
Yeah.
right kind of at
It was
the
at the start.
cusp of COVID that we had to cancel things.
Yep.
I've still got some shamrocks in the mail. But we're delighted to have you back, and I thought it might be nice to start this conversation with a little bit of reflection on your early years, or your formative years, let's say, here at RIT.
When I was a baby? Oh, yes. So, there was this stuff called Sun-In. I don't know if it's still on the market. Clairol made it. And I was conceived in Toronto, but born in Buffalo, and I came to RIT. I didn't like the idea of being too far from home, so an hour on the thruway was just about right. And I remember one of the photography professors stopped me one day and said, "Ooh, you look like Gloria Steinem." And I actually, being from Buffalo, said, "Who's Gloria Steinem?" And now I'm happy, fast forward, to say she's a buddy and a drinking pal and a lot of fun and loves herself a margarita. And so this was what I looked like on my student ID in 1970. The plan was to study medical illustration so I could pay my bills, because I'm very pragmatic. But I wanted to be a fine artist. And my fine art career dissolved quickly after the professors here got a hold of me, because as they often do magically in the most loving extensions of being mommies and daddies to us all, and I think you take that title to heart, they see things in us as students that we don't see yet in ourselves. And so this part of my life quickly changed, and I began to study design. This was my first assignment to illustrate with magic markers. And I remember it well because it was a Monday morning class, and this was Sunday evening, and I was sweating bullets because I hadn't done the assignment yet. I just didn't know what to draw and how to draw. I'd never really used markers, and so this is what I drew, which was a boot that I still have these boots. They've been repaired many times. And so that was my first illustration.
Nice. Thank you for that snapshot. After RIT, you had the fortitude and the good fortune to find yourself working for one of the most visible industrial designers on the planet at the time, Raymond Loewy. I wonder if you could share with us what that experience was like.
Well, of course, Mr. Loewy is the father of American design, industrial design. Served as a tremendous force in my life. It was such an honor to work with him. He did streamlining, he loved locomotives, and that was his doodle. You saw, this is his favorite car, the Avanti. Just so you know, I might be an industrial designer, but I'm not a car person. I owned one car in my entire life, a Volvo 240 DL white station wagon with a roof rack. But 5 years ago, I was struck by a car and have finally learned to walk again through the marvels of orthopedic surgery. My leg was saved. So cars aren't my thing. Mr. Lowy's favorite project, probably working with NASA. I always say he, but of course you realize a studio is a team event. So there were hundreds of us in the New York office. Lowy did Skylab, the first space station, and all the sundries, including the toilet, which is one of my favorite Big Bang Theory episodes, if you don't know that reference. He also found himself in a friendship with John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy, and one day was invited to Washington, and without knowing, the assignment was going to be to create what we now see as probably the most iconic plane on the planet, Air Force One. So picture Raymond Lowy with the President of the United States, 2 little boys in the Oval Office on the floor, literally, with crayons and paste and glue and scissors and construction paper, cutting out shapes and fighting over shades and creating this design. And that is literally how it was done. And Jacqueline was the one who picked out the shades of blue because she felt it represented the sky above us and the sea and all the greatness.
How do we get you in the Oval Office, Patty?
So I was the only broad at the end of the Mad Men era. If you don't know that HBO reference, that's something
The
worth.
mic is off.
Is my mic off?
Yeah, we've lost Patty's microphone.
That's true.
So this is the end of the Mad Men era. And I was the only broad, literally, the only female designer with all the guys in New York. Mr. Lowy was very sensitive to that, and in fact had a lot of pull in hiring me because he believed that we had to have the balance of presence of everybody on the ark in order to do good work. And he warned me it wasn't going to be easy, and he was very correct. It was brutal. I was treated irrationally badly. Crudeness, vulgarness, just hideous things. My first birthday, I came into my office, and on top of my drafting table was a pyramid of cucumbers. And at the top, a book, and I looked at the book, and the title was "A Cucumber is a Girl's Best Friend." It was not pleasant, but my response to all this was just to kill everybody with kindness. Plus, guys, I hope you know by now, you want to be really afraid of a woman you've offended who's being nice to you, because you don't know what's coming next. But I realized, because I was raised right, you don't answer a vulgarity or an unkindness in kind. You just show your best effort. So I went to HR, which was one lady who kept paper files, and I got everyone's birthday, and I started baking birthday cakes. And it's really hard to hate a broad who brings you a birthday cake. That's all there is to it. It's some kind of a, I don't know, 11th commandment or something. And slowly but surely, this odd nonsense of disliking me because of my gender dissolved. And we all became quite close friends and good friends because we also worked 8 days a week. It was a very rigorous studio. At the time, we were working here on the Soviet detente agreement, which was hopefully bringing design into the then Soviet Union. And sadly, it was an abject failure. All of our work is in the Stroganov Museum in Moscow, but nothing was ever built. It's really heartbreaking when I think of that.
Yeah. So tell us about the shift to the RLI.
The interesting piece was, as the only female voice at the table, and as someone who was raised with my grandparents in our home, my sensitivities were to what design had failed to do. You know, as a child, seeing my grandmother's pain, just trying to make dinner, how her arthritic hands hurt. My grandfather, who was injured in World War I, living life in a chair with wheels instead of being able to put one foot in front of the other. And I tried to bring that to the table. And I would hear sort of sighs and moans and groans, and, oh, Patty, we don't design for those people. So imagine those people being someone who didn't see organically with their eyes.
Right.
Let's go to the next slide. Again, someone who didn't move about on foot. Next. You know, someone who heard by sight. And someone who had a hand that could no longer do anything close to what it needed to do to get through the course of daily living. I would raise questions about our design and what we were failing to do. And I would just repeatedly hear, we don't design for those people. And that absolutely made no sense to me.
So clearly this was the moment where the germination of this idea about understanding elders began to
It was starting
take
to
off.
ferment, yeah.
Yeah.
No. Now, mind you, at this point, Chloe was, I think, 82. And I was chatting with his assistant, Doris, very formidable New Yorker. And, well, I was bitching and moaning in the ladies' room with her a lot. She finally said, why don't you just write it up and I'll give it to him. And so I wrote it up, and she gave it to him, and I was called into his office one night, and he said, what do you want to do about this? And I said, well, I have an idea. I've met a makeup designer. She was doing Saturday Night Live at NBC, and her name's Barbara Kelly, and she said she can make me look 85. So at this point, I'm 26, and with his blessing, a couple of weeks later, I became 85.
So this takes us back to the video that we showed at
Yes.
the beginning.
Yeah. And in the character of elders, I was able to travel throughout the US and Canada for over 3 years, just doing all the things we do in the course of a day. I took every mode of transportation, including hydrofoils. Went to movies, went to the theater, ate at fine restaurants, diners, you know, got scolded by people when I wasn't boarding the bus quickly enough, and picked up by strangers who rescued me from being hit by a car, and, you know, just trying to cross the street when the light changed so quickly because it was timed for people who were quick to move about. I was shortchanged by clerks who realized I couldn't see because we had reduced my vision. And, you know, I wasn't faking it, I wasn't acting. My whole body was prosthetically changed so that I could really experience what life might be like in future. And as you can imagine, each day was unique and different and challenging. There were happy moments and very sad moments. I was attacked by a gang and beaten, and we found years later that the injuries I sustained that day robbed me of the ability to bear a child. You know, so there were seriously low points, but lovely high points. I had more dates in character than I was having at 26, which, you know, I'm still in group for that. But it was just so much fun. You know, there was so much love and kindredship and fellowship and kindness. And you'd meet little children that were so sweet because you looked like grandma. You know, anyone with snow on the rooftop was grandma. And I enjoyed that so much. But then again, there was the cruelness of these kids who were no more than 12 beating me up for the fun of it. You know, so you never knew what you were going to experience day to day.
Right, so you saw both the best and the worst
Yeah.
in society up close and through a variety of lenses at
Yeah,
once.
and experience,
Yeah.
first person.
So clearly, this gave you this very unique perspective that led to thoughts on universal design.
I emerged from that experience even more intent on recognizing design had responsibilities for the lifespan from day one to day none, that the quality of life was a deliberate action of design, whether it was present or absent. And who were we as designers to fail in that initiative to see every potential and possibility for augmenting quality of life? And so that became the focus: inclusivity, universality for all ages, all abilities. Whether you're living in a grand house or in a very modest house. And who among us wants to say that any one person is above another? The work that I've done with wounded warriors is probably, sorry, it's very emotional, probably the hardest thing I've had to do. I presented at Walter Reed in Washington. A very lovely colonel was shadowing me, training me, and preparing me. And he said, "Patty, let me explain something to you. You are not going to meet these warriors as their girlfriend, as their mommy, as their doctor. There will be no tears. You are, in fact, their staff sergeant, and you've got to be tough as nails, and you have to make sure that they understand your purpose as their designer is to give them the highest level of function possible in terms of lifestyle." And they had been watching my work, and that's why I was invited in for this incredible challenge. And I remember the first day when I presented, this beautiful boy, farm kid, no legs, body blown to bits by the vulgarity of war. How that ever is going to give us peace, I do not understand. I never will. He was desperately depressed, not believing his physicians that they were going to get him walking again or any of it. He was at a standstill. And I remember, I won't use the language that I used, but I remembered what this colonel had said to me, and I swore like a sailor. And this kid started laughing his head off because he said it was so funny to see Pollyanna screaming and F this and F that, get out of that bed. And he said it made him believe that he wasn't going to die. It was going to get better. And the colonel was right. If I'd been crying and saying, there, baby, it's going to be okay, he wouldn't have had the wherewithal to pull it together and fight hard. And that fighting hard is what gives a child who's survived cancer, who's lost an organic limb and has a prosthetic limb, realize he's got the same life as his siblings and friends. And I don't know how any one of us can dare to say, oh, you're handicapped or disabled, once you realize design and technology are meant to be the great equalizers. And that, in a long-winded nutshell, is the purpose of inclusivity in design.
That's a wonderful, wonderful perspective. Thank you for that. So I have to ask, what's age got to do with it?
Well, we have to deal with numbers. So when you're 65 in the United States, you get Medicare. It's a good thing. I'm on it. I'm 71 next month. It works really well. Please don't take it away. It's keeping me healthy. I had to accept Social Security at 70. I still don't understand why I'm not allowed to put it in some kind of a bank account and say, well, I don't need it, but can I give the money to somebody? So what I do is I get that check every month and I spend it on causes and charities, because that's what I think it's for. So even at now 72, which is probably going to be the new 65 for the youngest among you tax-paying people in the audience, only because we're refusing to die. We're living so long that these young numbers make no sense. And if anything proves that point, it's Wang, my little boyfriend here, who started modeling at 85. And if you don't know his story, it's brilliant. he's an artist, an actor, and a model. And I think at 87 he just got his pilot's license. So we have to stop worrying about numeric age. It tells us next to nothing. What's really important is functional capacity. And yes, sometimes that correlates to age, but it's not about that number. We don't want to just put everybody in silos. So I warn you, always look at the capacity of a person, the ability level of a person, and that's what we should be designing to.
So I know that you have a special story and experience with Julia Childs, who is a kind of icon in the world of cooking. I wonder if you could tell us that story.
Well, Julia and I worked with RISD on the design of the future kitchen, which was so much fun because, of course, she believed her kitchen was the best kitchen in the world, her kitchen in Cambridge. And every inch of her kitchen had some device, implement, tool. But there came a day where, with her arthritis, she could no longer raise her arm above her shoulder, and she could no longer bend down past her knees. And when she got to that point of dysfunction, her kitchen was a foe, not a friend. And there was nothing to be done. And she realized she was time to give it up. You can see it in the Smithsonian now. And she moved, sadly, into assisted living. And I say sadly because that wasn't her choice. She was forced into giving up her autonomy and independence, and that's another hit on my long list of things we want to try and do. Having aging in place, being able to stay in the nest of your choice for the entirety of your life as you wish, really should be the goal. But sadly, we've quickly become a nation where dying in place is more the reality, and we saw that throughout COVID. With all of our elders trapped and alone, it was a hard reckoning to realize how much design has failed to meet the challenges of our time. And so now we have yet another agenda before us to make sure that this imagery goes away forever and that we get back on track.
Right. So much of your career has been spent as a thought leader, and I don't want to discount the work that you did as a product designer, some groundbreaking work. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the work you did with Farber and with OXO and those projects.
Well, I was married to one of the Smarties, Smart Design, and Sam Farber had worked with Smart Design previously, but he had recently retired to the south of France, he and his beloved wife Betsy. And one day he saw her struggling to prepare their meal because her arthritic fingers were hurting her so much, and they packed up, came back to New York, and started another phase of his illustrious career. And we created OXO Good Grips from that design reckoning, that failure of design, to give kitchen utensils more capacity to be comfortable and usable, inclusive, universal by design. And of course, it's become iconic for the whole movement.
It was an absolute shift in the industry. The first time people were truly paying attention.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was absolutely amazing. I remember the New York Times did a story on the Sunday supplement on the magazine, and it was something like the 10 sexy gifts for Christmas stocking stuffers or something. We made the list. We were so happy.
Making universal design sexy.
Yeah, yeah.
Kudos.
Again, I look around the world and I see design success, but I also see, more tragically, design failure. And for my mommy to not be able to have her bubble bath when she came to that point in life because the tub was unusable, also prompted the work that we do with Toto and all the design that's looking at the bath really as the hub of the home. We always thought it was the kitchen, but I would argue if you can't do hygienic routines, if you can't bathe and toilet yourself, you're going to get displaced. And any elder I've ever talked to around the world has said, don't let that happen. And they know they've got to fix what's occurring in this particular room. So the more usable we make it, the more safe it becomes, and the longer we can maintain our autonomy and independence. And that's a matter of design. That is not a medical issue. It's all about architecture and design.
Right. I think so often designers see what others don't because of their understanding of materials and technology and human needs. And your career is like an encyclopedia of those kinds of insights. Let's talk a little bit about the future and what you see with those designer eyes.
So I'm a baby boomer. I'm not the enemy. We started Earth Day, people. Let's calm down. But go back to Rosie and,
Okay.
sorry. So I loved the Jetsons. And yes, hello. The Jetsons was my first Star Trek. So, and by the way, I just want to warn you, I've never seen Star Wars. I'm a Trekkie. I really haven't seen Star Wars. I know about it, but I like Star Trek. I grew up believing that I would be Judy Jetson and Rosie the robot would be my bestie, and we would have this great life, and George would go off in his little flying spaceship and do whatever George did. God only knows, probably sold insurance or something. And we would have this perfect life, you know, because we'd have all this technology that was dutifully taking care of me and my home and my children and my dog, and go to the next slide. We're nowhere close. I can't believe I'm still not beaming up. I can't believe it takes 2 flights to get from Phoenix to Rochester, and it was hell yesterday, let me just tell you that. And I can't believe that science thinks that this is acceptable. And so I say to you, I don't accept it. I know exactly what I want in my future robot, and may it be soon. I want Captain Jack. I figure Captain Jack would be a great roommate, fabulous pool boy, just watching him run around with that odd little run.
Swagger.
Yeah, swagger. Let's call it a swagger, shall we? I just want a robot that is more of a person and not a Michelin man or a marshmallow monster or something like that. And you'll see I'm finally wearing an Apple Watch, but I can read the time on it, and I haven't had the time to study the manual for use. I mean, I am not an early adopter, I warn you, but I do understand the importance of this thing because I want it to manage my heart rate, you know, let me know when I'm in trouble. I want it to know when I fell down, so hopefully they call 911 so you don't find my dead body a week later. You know, I have these wants and needs and wishes and dreams, but this ain't it. You know, the technology that we had with Dick Tracy, what year did Dick Tracy start, 1937 or something? And this is as far as we've gotten. You know, come on people, we've got a lot of work to do. I am chipped. I don't work for the CIA. Everyone loves to say that, but I'm telling you, I really don't. But of course, if I did, I couldn't tell you, so you get to guess. But I am chipped, and it's because I travel to places all over the planet. Some are quite dangerous and risky, and at least hopefully they can find me. They, whoever they are, will find me someday. I'm having trouble seeing. My point on this is wearables need to become more the fixture of fashion and less Star Wars, Star Trek, Jetsons. It's got to be something that's so normative, just like eyewear is now. We were talking earlier today about Marilyn Monroe was in a movie called How to Marry a Millionaire. And she hid the fact that she was so blind she needed glasses or she'd walk into walls. And it was because in the 50s, a girl who wore glasses wouldn't receive passes. Heaven help us. And now, of course, we wear glasses as a fashion statement. I own hundreds of pairs of glasses, all shapes and colors and sizes. That's where design is leading all of this technology, so I can see, so I can hear, so I can think, so I can understand, so I can make choices. And wearable technology is certainly going to be so important. But again, why you're not able to beam up is absolutely beyond me. I can't believe we go through the TSA and all that nonsense. Oh, so I had to speak to the fact that now I also design trains. And Mr. Lowy used to say to me in his very, very heavy French accent that Patricia will design trains. And I used to think this guy is drinking way too much wine. Because I had no interest, as I said, in automotive design, train design. But this is the Phoenix Light Rail project. And the reason I said yes to it was this. I saw it as an opportunity to be the great equalizer. And my focus, no pun intended, was on making sure people who couldn't see would be able to move about on mass transit next, and people who needed mass transit to move about would be able to utilize mass transit. And so I said yes to the project. And so we've done the Honolulu light rail and Sky Harbor's train. And I don't necessarily love trains, but what I love is sharing with engineers and architects and fellow designers the whole purpose-driven design need for mass transit. But let me just share this other political caveat. Senator McCain was someone I never voted for, but we became friends in the end of his life, was against Phoenix having light rail and fought it really hard. And so I knew I had to get through to him. We had to have these conversations why that was important. And he became a great fan of light rail in Phoenix and did see it as the great equalizer. But he had been, for so much of his career, about gas and cars and four wheels, and that's how you normally get about, that it was something they weren't certain they wanted in Arizona. And there's been a great blockage for expansion because it's become such a political hot potato. But in the end, he was very much for it. I wish he had lived a bit longer. I think we would have seen rapid rail coming into Arizona and things that have been sadly taken off the table.
Sure. The Vignellis thought of design as something which was scalable.
Mm-hmm.
The design as one philosophy was really about seeing beyond scale and through scale, and realizing that the challenges were all the same in some respects, just a shift in scales and applications. Surely you've seen through that lens in your career. You've designed the microscopic to the macroscopic, and gone across categories. What are the big picture challenges that you see our global society facing now?
Well, I was very honored and humbled to be named Design Mind. But I do think about design all the time, and a lot. And I think we have yet to see the power of design and designers. And what is facing us on today's agenda is nothing like stuff. It's not devices and, fashion and cars. It's changing quality of life. So I see design fundamentally as being important to end inequity in the world, poverty, hate. I think design has a voice in mitigating and stopping war, and certainly coming up with a more humane response for those displaced by the violence that is war. And we haven't done that as yet. I also look at design failure, like the Grenfell fire in London, which you might know started in one of the flats that had a faulty refrigerator. And then sadly spread because the residents left the door open when they fled. And so it wasn't contained as well as it might have been in the initial stages of the fire, but what made it a deadly fire was the cladding that was being used on the building, which had not been sanctioned and was quite flammable and illegal, unfortunately. So people died because of design failure. And I see all of this forensic design as the new challenge for design. And I think we should be thinking really big in terms of what about nature and the things that are happening to us at every turn. When you work with Japanese architects who have come up with brilliant ways to have sustainability in terms of saving an edifice from collapse in a hurricane or an earthquake or a typhoon, all of the failures that are the result of our behaviors, our bad behaviors. You know, again, I'm in Arizona and we don't have water. Looking at Lake Mead drying up, and everyone's making jokes about mafia bodies we're finding in barrels, and you know that it's a little sick, it's not funny, but we have done great disservice to the planet, and it's killing not just us, but other innocents. So I see all of this as the new design agenda. I don't understand how any of us can be happy putting our head on a pillow at night when we look around our great nation and see so many people without a home. And I'm so energized by successes like IKEA's flat pack emergency housing that is humane and helpful. And I'm a big fan of a pope that said, don't build walls, build bridges, and a particular set of brilliant professors at San Jose State who came up with this response to a wall. I just feel like we need to go back to the beginning and hold hands and befriend each other. And I know it's not going to be easy. And I know it's tremendously challenging. But I think design has a responsibility. And the time is now.
I think that's a beautiful final statement for your talk tonight, but I want to make sure that this becomes a conversation, because we have a great audience out here this evening. So before, I'll put this slide up so that people have your contact information and so forth, but I would like to open this to questions before we wrap up tonight. So do we have any questions out there in the audience?
Please say yes.
Yes, we'll start here.
I'm curious, like when you first did the dress up and all of the research that you did, sort of following your work for such a long time, just curious, was there a research project that it was all focused on, or just curious how you got the funding? I'm guessing the Lowy Foundation probably helped do that research. But
If I understand the question, so it wasn't a sanctioned project. We tried. Mr. Lowy let me go to Washington, we knocked on doors, we looked for grants, we looked for funding. Nobody understood what I was talking about. They thought I was just out of my mind. And I was met by the scientific community and the medical community foremost as saying, well, you're not a doctor, you're a designer. What are you talking about? What do you think you can change? So we didn't have the nomenclature. It was early days. We weren't able to speak about this in the way we now can with universality and inclusivity in design. It was so new. I remember Tucker Viemeister, a dear friend, saying, don't you want to be a designer anymore, that you're doing all this social science stuff? And I was like, yeah, I want to be a really, really great designer. It was so foreign, the thinking that you would combine the social sciences and the design arts, that nobody really got it. So I ended up paying for all the research on my own. Nobody helped with that. What did help, of course, was I was working with very good people who let me go off. So I was sent to a city for a project, but then I was allowed to stay a couple of days, and what I was doing was going into character. And so that way we went to 116 cities throughout the US and Canada. But we never got a grant, we never got any monies. Now you could get that funded, but then nobody really understood. And nor, sadly, did they think designers were smart enough to do anything or should be part of the party, which is so silly, don't you think? If not designers, who? And it gets me to jump ahead to say that's why I think designers have to get more political and quickly. You know, there's not one architect or designer in the Senate, and I think that's a big piece of the problem. We didn't pass basic health care in the United States of America until the Senate included doctors, not just lawyers and politicians. So the more humane we make our leadership, the more sensible our leading will become. And so I fully expect, I'm looking at the President of the United States sitting out here. It's not gonna be me, I'm tired. Plus, I wanna go back to my roots. I kept promising myself at 70 I'd be a fine artist again. It's not happening, I've never been busier. And I'm happy about that. I don't wanna sound like I'm complaining. But I do think we're going to have to get very, very political and quickly.
Excellent, thank you. I think, Steve, did you have a question, or? No, I saw it, oh, further up.
Question. You mentioned you travel around the world, and your world travels. Are there places that you feel are getting it right, either in a sports arena or a hospital or schools or anything like that?
I think Scandinavia has led, certainly with accessible design well before we even started to embrace that agenda. There's always this sensibility that you have, mixed-use housing, you have an elder couple as your neighbors and a young married couple here, and they care about each other and look after each other. There's just a normalness to it. You know, what I would reference as a Mayberry, if you watch any of the TV Land classics, just basic sensibility of being good neighbors and friends and being kind. How simple could that be? Scandinavia, most definitely. There is no place left in the world, sadly. It used to be that we could say in South America, in the Latin countries, Spain, even Italy, elders had better care. That's gone away. There's ageism in every country, sadly, now. And everyone's fighting. If you remember what we saw for France, changing the retirement age, riots in the streets. But again, we're not dying, so taxes have to pay for that Social Security check, that pension. And the money has to come from something, and it comes from working and taxes. So we have made strides, but sadly, so much ageism still. It's still a very hot topic. Elder care is improving, but we are nowhere near ready to take care of the tsunami that is the boomer generation. And I worry so much about those of you who are at the start of your careers or training, having to foot the bills that you will incur, because I'm not dead. And we've made healthcare, particularly in this country, a very expensive profit center. And that's the great sin of it. That's all there is to it.
More questions, all the way in the back?
So I really appreciate you talking about all of this stuff and how we as designers need to be more political and really make change where it needs to be. How do you recommend not losing hope when your ideas get shut down or people don't want to make changes that you think would be more accessible?
Most sincerely, we've just left that meeting, you and me, people cut from the same piece of cloth, a simpatico. We go to the ladies' loo, we go to a coffee shop, we cry in our beer, we hug, we commiserate, and we make a plan. And we just keep pushing forward. The consensus is built when just two people come together. And beyond that, 3 people and 4 people. Margaret Mead famously said that there's never been more success than like-minded people coming together with an agenda. It's the only thing that has ever changed the world. And she was right. That's what we have to do. We have to find our comrades and join together. Just as sadly, we have the opposite side, or the opposite end of that polarity. People being unkind, inhumane, vulgar, crude, dismissive, divisive. If those are going to be the negative forces in our lives, we have to meet them with the birthday cakes and the hugs and the smiles and the tough love and the progress. We can't give in to all that negativity. It honestly is why I still get out of bed in the morning and work, instead of, I think, selfishly just saying, I'm gonna paint. You know, I just couldn't live with myself. There's still so much to be done, and I'm still being asked to be part of teams doing those things. And I never know what it's going to be. Interesting that I'm working on a project in Norway right now. Norway, amazingly, evidently, research has shown, has the highest level of body dysmorphia on the planet. Norway. I mean, I don't think they're known for beach bodies and things. I don't understand how that started, but it broke my heart to hear about the high levels of anorexia and bulimia, and not just as is traditional here in the States, and I should say in North America, among women, men. So self-loathing and loneliness and depression are at such a peak, and COVID didn't help. And who would have known, as designers, we have a role in mitigating and meeting the needs of a population that looks at the mirror in the morning and hates themselves and does themselves harm. So you never know what project you're going to work on, and every day brings a new opportunity. So that would be my answer, is just, I'm a Pollyanna because I do really believe we can make it better. I'm just that naive, and I know we can't do it alone. So that's why I'm here.
Well, it's said that many great designers are optimists, and that seems to be true of your core as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question in the front.
Yeah, I have a question. So, you talk about younger generation designers should get more political, like involved into like making changes and making decisions, but there's a giant age gap between like people who like younger generation and people who have the fund, have the resource, have the right to make all the decisions. How do we, like, I guess that gap gave like a huge disadvantage to like younger generation people when we try to ask for fun, ask for, you know, understanding, ask for like pushing certain things forward, and we got a lot of bounce back from that. Like, is there any advice or suggestion you'll give younger generation to help with that? And also, I want to say thank you, because it was an honor. When I went to undergrad here at RIT, I heard your presentation years ago, and that's the reason why I got into like a design for like
You're killing me.
a lot of stuff. And I worked 4 or 5
Thank
years
you.
and came back for my master's and all those stuff. It's really good to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much. What a compliment. I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but the strength is in numbers, you know, so like-minded people coming together, we're no longer weak when we're a team. You know, the lone voice standing, you know, crying out to the wind maybe isn't heard, but my grandfather used to, I loved my grandfather so much. He lived to be 95. He died in his own bed with my mother holding his hand. He only went through an education through the 4th grade, and then he went to work as a laborer in the steel mills, and just a remarkable man. But he put all 4 of his daughters through grad school, you know, that backbone of our great nation. He used to always say to me, Patty Ann, the chain is only as strong as the weakest link. And that's true. So I realize by understanding that at a very young age, I was always most interested in the weakest link, how to make it stronger and take away that label and maybe wave a magic wand, but at least be a helpmate to the person who needed that support. So, like the last question, when we come together, like minds come together and do good works, I think it's that snowball going down the hill and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually I think we'll drown out the naysayers and the people that don't necessarily have best intentions. And yes, I find it very hard to coexist in this divisive polarity we're living in today, but I like still to meet negativity and anger with a smile and understanding that that big mouth bully is the most frightened person in the room. It's always been the case. A bully is a baby, a scaredy cat, terrified something, I won't say a person, who's pushing back others because of their own insecurity and their own fear. And so do you meet that with anger? No, you meet it with love, you meet it with kindness, you meet it with support, and then hopefully eventually it turns. Not always, but that's how we best move forward. We stick together, work hard together, and I really am that much of an optimist.
I think we have time for one more question from the audience here.
I wanted to know if you had a particular experience or project or professor while you were at RIT that you found particularly influential on your trajectory.
Well, there's actually two. One was we went to an inner city kindergarten downtown Rochester. I'm sorry, I don't remember the number or the name anymore. And we were invited because they had no budget, and these poor little kids had nothing. It was just such an unhealthy environment for learning and play, and of course a child's work is play. And our whole class designed this kindergarten space by begging and borrowing and stealing resources. We were talking earlier today about this project because we would just go to a hardware store and beg and paint. We had no money, you know, we were getting carpet samples and all this stuff. And then we put it together with the little ones. They had these tremendous tall windows with window shades. We took those down, we laid them out, and we had all the children lay down, and we did like, you know, CSI body outlines, and then we let the kids paint them and make them everything they wanted. And so imagine their art gallery that they had designed themselves, these beautiful window shades now that they loved having the window shades down because they could see what they had done. And then the parents started coming in, and they were participating now, and the teachers didn't feel as stressed because they actually had helpmates in this learning environment. We had this sonotube, and we made a rocket ship out of it, and there was a ladder inside. And I think about OSHA and lawyers, and they probably would have had a hissy, but thank God, I guess they didn't find out about this project. And we didn't do it. We had the kids draw the letters of the alphabet and the numbers and made these posters and plastered them all over the wall. And this was all with found objects and borrowed, as I like to say, objects, and shaming store owners into giving us free stuff. And we just built this fabulous environment. And I was sharing with the dean earlier a picture, a print from ID Magazine that I had sent in the information to ID Magazine, and they published it, but I didn't ask permission. I didn't know that was expected. I just thought, oh, we have to get this published. And there it was in ID Magazine, and we were so excited that the real designers thought we student designers had done something good, and we got a whole page notice, and that was a lot of fun. But then I found out there are offices and policies and things you have to ask people. You know the adage, don't you? Don't ask permission, just apologize later. something like that.
Ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
I have a final question for you,
Okay.
Patty. What do you want to be remembered for?
Oh, goodness. I hope I'm known as a nice person. I hope that's, you know, I've had wait staff, I've had housekeepers in hotels, janitors come up to me and just give me a spontaneous hug and say, "You're such a nice person," and that is just about the highest praise. To have someone who works so hard at a job that's so thankless, made happy by your presence, that I'm pleased with that. So I hope I'm known as a nice person.
That's a great answer. I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and your insight and your story with us tonight. And it's a special pleasure to know that some of that story evolved here at RIT, and that you've taken that show on the road and been so influential globally. And we continue collectively to wish for great success for you, and always will welcome you home.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.